Welcome back. And now for the news in detail, we start with northeastern Syria, where sporadic clashes between Turkish forces and the Kurdish groups are ongoing despite a temporary ceasefire brokered by the US. The head of the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Rami Abdurrahman, says there has been artillery strikes in the town of Ras al-Ain. Rahman said both the Turkish military and its Syrian allies were involved in fighting with the Kurdish-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces. Ras al-Ain has been a major goal of the Turkish offensive since its launch on October the 9th. Earlier, Turkey announced it will pause its operation for 5 days to allow withdrawal of the Kurdish forces. Under the deal, Vice President Mike Pence said US will facilitate orderly withdrawal of YPG forces from a 32-kilometer safe zone. Libya has launched a complaint with Moscow against Russian mercenaries who fight the Tripoli war alongside Haftar forces. In an interview, PM Fayez al-Sarraj said Libyan forces captured belongings of Russian men during a raid on the front line. He said his government trusts Moscow's role in Libya's stability. Al-Sarraj also denied that there are any mercenaries fighting alongside Libyan armed forces. Meanwhile, China has vowed to probe the use of its drones by Haftar forces in Libya. This came after the Libyan Foreign Ministry called for an investigation. Russia has called on BRICS partners to minimize the risk of conflict and ensure stability in the nuclear rocket sphere. At a meeting of the group in Brasilia, Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev said Moscow rejects all unilateral sanctions. Patrushev noted the importance of adapting the system of international security to new conditions. He said BRICS countries are at the forefront of countering growing threats of international community. Patrushev said Russia is enhancing cooperation with Brazil in its fight against terrorism, drug trafficking and transnational crime. In Brussels, EU leaders have failed to reach agreement on allowing Albania and North Macedonia to start talks to join the bloc. The deadlock comes days after EU ministers hit a similar impasse at the talks in Luxembourg. Senior EU leaders and all the member states except France believe North Macedonia has made sufficient efforts for talks to start. Albania, by contrast, has less support. The Netherlands, Denmark and France have voiced serious reservations about the progress it has made on reforms. Almost 100 people have been injured after police fired rubber bullets at protesters demanding freedom and release of the jail leaders. Catalan separatists burned police barricades in Barcelona and other cities. Tossing Molotov cocktails at police, hundreds of protesters set roadblocks and rubbish containers on fire in Barcelona. Rescue services said 58 people have been injured in Barcelona, while another 38 sustained injuries in Catalan cities. Police in Catalonia have detained 97 protesters since Monday. Protests were triggered after a court jailed 9 of their leaders over a failed independence bid in 2017. Two Palestinians have been wounded after Israeli forces fired rubber bullets on unarmed protesters in Ramallah city. Palestinians have taken to the streets in protest against the Israeli establishment of a new settlement outpost in Turmus Aya land. Israeli occupation forces fired rubber bullets after failing to disperse the protesters with tear gas. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have detained 9 Palestinians during multiple overnight raids across the West Bank. None of the soldiers were injured in the collision. Palestinians live in fear as Israeli forces could bomb them at any time under the guise of fighting terrorism. One child survivor of an Israeli airstrike on Gaza 5 years ago dreams of having superpowers. It's his way of coping with the trauma of living under Israeli occupation. This report has the details.
Israel's war crimes in Palestinian territory have taken a lot from thousands of children, but the survivors' stories don't finish with bombs and bullets. Yamin, just 3 years old at the time, and his baby sister survived. His back is still scarred and his left forearm remains deformed. The caretaker of both children still remembers the horrible incident.
On 29th July 2014, a massacre of my husband's family occurred. The massacre took the lives of 18 people, mostly women and children, especially 8 children. Only 2, Gaina and Yamin, emerged from the rubble that day.
But Yamin still has hope for the future and wants to be a policeman or even a superhero like Spider-Man.
I want to play ball. Or when I grow up, I want to become a policeman. I wish I were Spider-Man and I had superpowers.
Founder of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, Raji Sourani has demanded Israel to open a war crimes investigation into the incident. But after 5 years, he still has not got any answer.
We asked them to investigate about the war crime and to find out what had happened. And it's our right, it's the right of the victims or their relatives or even Yemen, this young boy, to know why he lost 19 of his family members, including his father and mother.
Israel is still committing war crimes in Palestinian territories. Meanwhile, Jewish settlements in the West Bank and land seizures are making the two-state solution into a distant dream.
2 foreign workers in Lebanon have choked to death from smoke during the ongoing protests against government taxes. Dense smoke engulfed the demonstration site after a symbolic fire spread to a building near the major protests in capital Beirut. State media says the death toll could rise as rescuers are trying to pull the bodies out and douse the blaze. Thousands have taken to the streets across Lebanon against the government's plans to impose new taxes amid an economic crisis. Police fired tear gas as protesters blocked roads, prompting heavy deployment of security forces. In Yemen, the United Nations says 388 civilians have been killed or injured due to the conflict in September. It said this had been the deadliest month for civilians so far this year. During a Security Council meeting, UN humanitarian chief Mark Lowcock said only 250 agencies are working for over 12 million people stuck in the deadly war. He called for a nationwide ceasefire under international humanitarian law to protect the civilians. Last week, airstrikes destroyed a UN-supported water system that provided for 12,000 people. As the debate over France's hijab ban intensifies, President Emmanuel Macron says Muslims should not be stigmatized nor Islam linked with terrorism. Speaking on the sidelines of the Franco-German summit in Toulouse, Macron called for indiscriminate unity among all French citizens. The statement came after a far-right parliamentarian asked a mother volunteering on a school trip to remove her headscarf. The issue ignited a national debate. It caused outrage against MP Julien O'Doul when he posted a video confronting the woman on the social media. It's time for a short break, but coming up next in the bulletin. Classes suspended, 300,000 children affected. And Greenpeace's fleet explore areas broad ecosystem. Welcome back. Muslim parties in the Ayodhya Babri Mosque case have rejected a proposal for the settlement of the decades-old dispute. The proposal leaked to the media on Thursday said Muslims would surrender their claim over the mosque in favor of a temple. The proposal, drafted by Indian Waqf Board, was part of a mediation effort under the aegis of Indian Supreme Court. In the statement, the Muslim appellants said that they do not accept the procedure by which the mediation has taken place. Muslim parties lawyer Ijaz Maqbool raised questions regarding the recent practices of the mediation committee. He also took issue with the manner in which the withdrawal of the claim has been suggested as a compromise. In Mexico, heavily armed fighters have freed drug lord Joaquim El Chapo Guzman's son after a dramatic gunfight with the National Guard. Mexico's Security Minister Alfonso Durazo said National Guard patrol came under attack from within a house in the city. Durazo said gangsters had set up roadblocks and were unleashing heavy automatic gunfire. Police were successful in detaining Guzman, but the decision was withdrawn to restore the calm in the city. El Chapo led the Sinaloa cartel for decades, escaping from prison twice before being arrested and extradited to the U.S. New Zealand will start armed police patrols in parts of the country to prevent attacks like Christchurch shooting. Police commissioner said the mosque attack in March that killed 51 Muslim worshippers has changed the operating environment. Bush said police must ensure that people are enabled to practice their religion without fear. He said the armed response teams will roll out in Auckland, Waikato and Canterbury on October the 28th on a 6-month trial. They will be routinely armed, equipped and ready to support frontline police officers at incidents that require enhanced tactical capabilities. The police commissioner said there was no immediate threat. In the U.S., teachers are out on the streets rather than tending to their classrooms in the third largest Chicago state. These nearly 33,000 teachers all have legitimate concerns. Find out more in this report.
Thousands of teachers and staff walked off their school jobs, cancelling classes for 300,000 students. At the heart of the dispute is class sizes and resources rather than pay. Teachers say they want more social workers, nurses and librarians for their students.
Throughout the entire city, there's an inequality, and there are schools that don't have librarians, don't have a nurse, don't have a social worker, and we have trauma in this city. We have kids that need supports, and we're a first world country, and we have the resources, but we're not allocating them in the right way.
They also believe they don't have sufficient time to prepare teaching materials and should not have to take on more than one task.
I'd rather just get smaller classroom size, and the money is not the issue here. For me and a lot of the teachers, that's why we're here. It's just what we need to make our schools better. The supplies that we don't get, we're spending our own money. More and more every year, you're spending your own money, get less and less.
The Chicago Public Schools District, which had been dealing with a budget crisis, was recently buoyed by significant new state funding of $1.9 billion. The union says the cash has resolved the district's structural deficit, but still carries a shortage of $8.4 billion.
Moving on to Hong Kong, where a murder suspect who prompted the extradition bill that sparked unrest has decided to turn himself into Taiwan authorities. Chan Tong Kai, 20, who has been serving time in Hong Kong for money laundering, will be released next Wednesday. An Anglican priest who visited the suspect in jail says Chan hopes the move will calm months of chaos. Chan was jailed last year over money laundering charges and murder suspicion. He is wanted in Taiwan for allegedly killing his pregnant girlfriend in Taipei last year. China has sent a new communication technology experiment satellite into the orbit from the Xichang Satellite Launch Center in Sichuan province. The satellite, launched by a Long March 3B carrier rocket, will be used for multi-band and high-speed communication technology experiments. The satellite and the carrier rocket were developed by the China Academy of Space Technology. The China Aerospace Corporation collaborated with the Academy to blast off the satellite. It is the 315th mission of the Long March rocket series. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has expressed gratitude to China for assistance in building a railway line linking Nairobi to the town of Naivasha. The project was part of the One Belt and One Road initiative, upgrading trade routes between Asia, Africa and China. This report has more. Take a look.
Waving the Kenyan flag, President Uhuru Kenyatta inaugurated the country's new railway line. Trains stopped at every station where a cheering crowd awaited the president. He promised his people that the new railway will bring prosperity to their country. Thanking China at the launch ceremony, Kenyatta called the Chinese true friends of Kenya.
The People's Republic of China, their various development partners, and China Road and Bridge Cooperation. I want to thank them for being true friends of Kenya's growth and development agenda.
The railway line is expected to ease congestion at the Nairobi-Naivasha highway, as well as boost regional trade and the local economy.
It cuts down on the travel time. The second one is the mass transport. You're able to move many people at the same time. Again, it will open up Naivasha for purposes of especially industrial.
China is also working on the second phase of the project, which will eventually link Nairobi and the Uganda border.
In northern Syria, centuries-old bazaar in Aleppo has been reopened 7 years after its closure due to the brutal fighting in the city. The market is not just a trading place for local vendors and shoppers, but also a place with good memories from the past. This report will tell you more.
Fresh meat, nuts, sweets, and a bustling crowd re-injected life into the rebuilt Al Sakatia market, featuring cobblestone-covered alleys. Many vendors returned to the old market the moment they heard about its reopening. The 52-year-old Abdullah Al-Tayyib is one of them. He sold nuts in the market for years before the war. When the war started, he closed his store and left the market.
I was in despair when I left the market. I never expected one day I would come back. Thanks to the efforts of so many people, we are finally back here. The old market is our wealth, and we will not leave it.
The old market is listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO for its unique Arabic culture.
By reopening this market, the Syrian government wishes to send the world a message that we are committed to preserving our cultural heritage, although many of them were destroyed in the war.
Local authorities promised to renovate even more old markets in Aleppo.
On the north coast of South America, Greenpeace's research ship is on a mission to explore a new marine biome off the coast of Guyana. A team of French scientists have been working to identify the Amazon reef's diverse marine life, as well as making a case to keep the area from the fossil fuel foragers. This report will tell you more.
Off the coast of French Guyana lies one of the world's largest coral reefs, only recently discovered. The Esperanza, part of Greenpeace's fleet, has come to explore this unique and extensive ecosystem. On board, scientists scan the waves from sunrise to sunset. They carefully record all the species they sight in this area rich with marine life.
We have an idea of how many species we have, of the diversity, but we have very little information on their habits, their migrations.
Biologists spot a school of whales in the middle of a hunt, and within minutes the Zodiac is being launched under the watchful eye of the captain. Between the tuna and sharks, scientists observe the bride's whale for the first time in this area. A rare species, they grow up to 16 meters long. This is proof for these naturalists that the area is far from being an oceanic desert.
If they feed here, it is because they are important areas for the survival of species. So inevitably, if there are too many disturbances, they will have to leave these areas, and it is not easy for them to find the same conditions in other areas.
The word survival might sound strong, but the threat from fossil fuel foragers is very real. It's not just the reef which would suffer in the event of an oil spill. On land, mangrove forests stretch all along Guyana's coast, serving as crucial fish nurseries as well as absorbing carbon from the atmosphere.
In case of oil pollution, we could see oil pellets entering this mangrove. Bear in mind that this mangrove is still the breeding location for our fish.
For Guyanese fishermen, fossil fuel companies represent a chance to renew their obsolete equipment. From its oceans to its forests, Guyana is rich in natural resources, but the questions of whether they should be exploited divides opinion in the capital, Cayenne. The fragility of the Amazon reef underlines the urgency of reaching an international agreement. Experts on board Esperanza hope their findings will convince decision makers to sign an ambitious treaty to protect the oceans.
Lows and the highs of the business world now. The US has imposed tariffs on a record $7.5 billion worth of European goods. Washington imposed the duties despite France's warning it will retaliate. The duties were levied after the US won a landmark case at the WTO over EU's unfair subsidies to Airbus. In the line of fire are civilian aircraft from Britain, France, Germany and Spain. But the tariffs also target consumer products like French and Scottish alcoholic beverages. France's Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire said that tariffs will have very negative consequences, both from an economic and political point of view. Facebook's plans to launch its Libra cryptocurrency face a new hurdle at joint annual meeting of the World Bank and IMF. The G7 nations said such stablecoins should not be allowed to launch until the profound international risks they pose are addressed. Apart from this, a number of key issues were discussed, such as trade and sustainable development. On the sidelines, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said she's encouraged by news of a tentative trade deal reached by Washington and Beijing. The annual meeting brings together finance and political leaders from all over the world. European stock markets have traded lower as investors eye passage of Brexit deal from the British Parliament. Renault shares have slumped after the car maker issued a sales warning, bringing down pan-European stock 600. London's benchmark FTSE 100 index is down by 0.4%. The Paris CAC 40 and Frankfurt's DAX 30 has also dropped marginally. Meanwhile, sterling dipped about 0.1% against the dollar. Now the weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now. Further updates, stay tuned with Indus.